Number 10, Mike Tyson. So I had trouble landing on just one interview to mention when it comes to this man. He is someone who seems to just bounce back after every single heinous thing he's done. So we're going to run through a few of them. The first time Mike really hurt his career was in the 80s, and it wasn't even something he said. He was doing an interview with his then girlfriend Robin Gibbs. When the topic of Mike's behavior came up, she said herself that Mike had an extremely volatile temper. Recent reports had also surfaced of Mike getting loud and physical with Robin, something she seemingly confirmed, while Mike just stared at the interviewer the entire time, giving him an evil look. Now, that was one of the first little notches on his belt. That wasn't really a meltdown. As the years went by, more and more controversies came to light, and during a press tour for his latest bout in the early 2000s, he lashed out at a fan in the crowd, hurling a slew of insults and calling them the British word for cancer sticks. It starts with an F and it rhymes with maggot. The clip became viral overnight and placed his career in jeopardy, but he finally drove that nail into the coffin on CP24's Breakfast Television in 2014. After somehow maintaining enough relevance to get a one-man show, Mike was sitting down with host Nathan Downer to promote when the interview took a hard left and went from "so what's the show about" to "so should you even be allowed on stage, you monster?" That's not what he actually said, but apparently that's what Mike Tyson heard, because he stopped answering questions and would instead hurl sarcastic insults. The F word is once again his favorite, and just throws it at him. I don't know if you've noticed, but Mike hasn't been on the news much since then, and probably for a good reason. Number 9, Paula Abdul. Q13 Fox News. In 2012, famous judge and British bad boy Simon Cowell decided to fire his fellow X Factor judge after she went on Fox News and made herself sound like a little bit of a fool. During an interview with Q13, things started out a little rocky thanks to some audio issues causing Paula to hear a station in Texas instead of their own. When they eventually got everything up and running, Paula was just as confusing as she was with the original issues. The interviewers were trying to ask her about her visit to Seattle, where Simon claims that the worst singers that he has ever encountered dwell. Instead of defending the city, Paula doubled down and agreed with Simon. It's not the statement though that landed her in the hot seat, it was actually just the way that she was speaking. Paula had always been a little bit animated in her life, using arms a lot when speaking to people, but she was particularly slurry and seemed like she was under the influence of something. This was just one of several interviews where Paula is noticeably woozy. Simon Cowell has actually claimed the only reason she was invited to host on the X Factor in the first place was to see if she would bring in the American Idol viewers, and when that didn't pan out, he realized the right move to make was to let her go because she's not great on television. Of course, Paula was mad about this and confronted Simon several times, only making that meltdown bigger and bigger. Number 8, Robert Downey Jr. Being a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe means a ton of interviews. Now, Robert had the fortune of playing Iron Man for 10 years, being featured in 11 movies. While doing press for his second round with the Avengers in 2015, he had the misfortune of speaking with a legendarily terrible interviewer, Krishnan Guru Murphy, on Channel 4. Now, I've talked about this guy in other videos for making Quentin Tarantino walk out of an interview, and he is making a return for something pretty similar. The interview is uncomfortable from the very beginning. Krishnan stumbles through his questions as quickly as he can, with Robert doing his best just to keep things smooth. Instead of asking questions about the movie though, Krishnan decided to probe Robert about his life in prison and with substance control issues. Now, at first, he's okay and answers the questions, but then Krishnan brings up his dad and asks if he feels that he escaped his dark past. Robert is visibly anxious and begins breathing pretty heavy to keep himself calm. He asks what they were doing there, and then the team said goodbye. He stood up and walked out of the room, and he said that Krishnan seemed nice, but things were getting just a little bit too Diane Sawyer for his taste. This was one of the most uncomfortable interview moments in Robert's career, and it's not even close to the worst one for Krishnan. Number 7, Sofia Vergara. Fans of the show Modern Family will recognize Sofia as Gloria, aka Manny's mom, who is just absolutely hilarious and heartwarming at the same time, even outside of Modern Family. Now, while speaking with Ellen in 2017 about her career and some new projects coming up, Ellen decided to play a game called English Word of the Day. Claiming to be learning Spanish with one word a day, she wished to teach Sofia one as well. Before the segment, Sofia is roasting Ellen for her dislike of cotton, but when Ellen asks if she wants to learn the English word with her, Sofia scoffs and is visibly annoyed, claiming that she speaks English very well. Ellen gives her the word flabbergasted and asks her to define what it means. Not only does she pronounce it correctly the first time, but she knew exactly what it meant Ellen follows it up with discombobulated, which left Sophia confused and thinking pretty hard. Now, she butchered the word, and while she seemed to be taking things in stride, it turns out Sophia was so frustrated with participating in this game, as she is a bit self-conscious when it comes to her accent. A lot of people consider the segment to be a little bit racist and more cringe-inducing than fun. I've seen the clip. That's accurate. Number 6, Joaquin Phoenix. We understand a dedication to your craft, and Joaquin Phoenix is just a prime example. This dude's acting career has been going steady since he first appeared in the 1989 comedy Parenthood when he was in his teens. Now, while he is seen as one of the greatest actors in recent history, his reputation on set was a little tarnished thanks to a freak out while filming the 2018 solo flick Joker. He appeared on Jimmy Kimmel Live to promote the shoot when Jimmy plays a behind-the-scenes clip of Joaquin getting loud and angry at a man named Larry, and the constant whispering behind the cameras before dropping a few F-bombs and storming off this set. When the cameras came back to the studio, Joaquin was frozen in shock and clearly not expecting that clip to ever see the light of day. He is not having a good time. He explained that Larry was a cinematographer who teased Joaquin off set earlier in the day, calling him a diva and referring to him as Cher. In fact, if you're watching the clip and during the outbursts, you can actually hear him say, "You want to call me Cher? How is that an insult?" He then explained that there is a lot of pressure on set, especially in a closed space, like the apartment from the scene that they were filming. He apologized to the audience for having to see him behave like that, which, was met with applause. Because at the end of the day, he's a performer and no harm came from the outburst or the meltdown, and honestly, if Larry's cool with it, so are we. Number 5, Nicolas Cage. The most unhinged man in Hollywood history. One of the few people who somehow managed to star in billions of movies, but has barely seen or kept a cent of that money. During a press junket in 1990, Nick went on a talk show called Wogan to discuss his latest project, Wild at Heart. When the host Terry Wogan announced Nick Cage, he entered with karate kicks, a front flip, somersault. He threw wads of cash at the audience because, hey, he's Nick Cage, why not? And when he finally sat down, moments before the interview actually began, he asked if he could take his jacket off. He proceeds to take his jacket off and the shirt underneath of it, because if people thought Nick Cage was all together, they were proven wrong during this interview. Despite the content being relatively tamed, the entire time you can just see sweat glistening off of Nick's chest, because guess what? Wearing a leather jacket on your bare chest is beyond uncomfortable, especially when there are lights aimed at you. Now sure, it might look cool until you take it off and you just have a heat rash. Nick's always been unhinged, but this meltdown during this interview was truly unique. His behavior in the 90s was apparent and well documented thanks to him literally being in like 2 movies a year. Number 4, Christian Bale. Christian is a very versatile actor, physically and of course skill-wise. He's able to shrink and grow his physique seemingly at will. He's played everything from a skinny substance addict to Batman in 2008. Christian starred in the 3rd film of the Terminator franchise, Terminator Salvation, and while he was filming a scene, director of photography Shane Holbert apparently just moved into Christian's eyesight, and this caused Christian to snap out of character and into defense mode. The now infamous audio clip of Christian screaming at Shane to make matters worse, anyone trying to calm Christian down were met with an equally swift verbal lashing. While the cinematographer was just checking a light to make sure that it was in the right place, like doing his job, Bale made it his mission to share his intense feelings with the entire crew. When the audio leaked, Bale apologized for his actions and told the world to praise the crew for their work. Now, while the movie turned out okay visually speaking, the project as a whole is remembered as a terrible Terminator movie, and he gets pretty uncomfortable when he talks about it on stage. Number 3, Paris Hilton. Paris is the originator of the phrase famous for being famous, because this woman made headlines many times over the years for a little bit of everything. In 2011, Paris appeared on ABC to discuss her career, her personal life, and the recent situations she had been dealing with involving stalkers. During the interview, she revealed a few things about her life that had previously been speculated, like the fact that she used a higher-pitched baby voice on the show Simple Life, but had a much deeper and serious tone in real life. But the conversation eventually ventures into uncharted waters. The interviewer asked Paris if she felt that her former friend and protege, Kim Kardashian, had overshadowed her in the eyes of the media. Paris says nothing, looks to her publicist, and goes to stand up. They almost wrapped the interview entirely, but eventually things simmered down and they were able to clear up the air. However, the moment stuck with fans of Hilton immediately and begged the question, why is she so uncomfortable talking about this? And it's because it's true. Well, it turns out the world answered the question for her, because Kim Kardashian's show, Keeping Up with the Kardashians, made it big, and Paris Hilton's show was cancelled after 1 season. So There you go. Number 2, Tom Cruise. Matt Lauer is not just a terrible person who turned out to be a creepy creepo. He was once a popular talk show host in the early 2000s. During an interview with Tom Cruise in 2005, the topic of his scientific beliefs came up that quickly sent Tom into a rant about psychiatry, and somehow the topic got into Ritalin and pseudosciences. I don't know, Tom yelled at Matt about knowing more than him about psychiatry, like he had some inside information that he was secretly a therapist, who knows. The interview came at the height of Tom's pretty public descent into chaotic badness, becoming very famous for his outlandish beliefs and his wish to push them onto other people. The highlight of the interview came when Cruise was asked about his previous criticisms of Brooke Shields taking anti-sad time pills, to which he responded by calling her a glib. I looked up the definition of that word and it means fluent and voluble but insincere and shallow. What? This was only one of the several interviews from 2005 that I wanted to discuss today, especially with Tom Cruise. Good lord, that was a rough year for him. When he was with Katie Holmes, he was a nutcase. Just ask Oprah. I mean, ever since the mid-2000s, his career has mainly been Mission Impossible, with only a few small roles to fill the gaps here and there, not the Hollywood superstar that he was aiming to be. And at number 1, my favorite entry, Bobcat Goldthwait. Allow me to start the entry by doing an impression of Bobcat. Thank you. Bobcat may not be much of an actor these days, but in the 80s and 90s, this man was dominating the film and comedy scene. His zany brand of over-the-top, high-energy performance was so well received by any and all who saw him. I can still hear his voice echoing in my head whenever I think of Police Academy. In 1994, comedian Arsenio Hall invited his longtime buddy Bobcat onto his talk show, which unfortunately was in its final days on the air. When he heard of the cancellation, Bobcat decided to send a message to the big brains that made the decision, because he spray painted the word Paramount on the wall behind him, throws furniture around, breaks TV screens, all the while Arsenio is just sitting back and laughing. When they returned from commercial, the set was in ruins, and despite that, Arsenio joked that he was like, "The worst part is I have to pretend like I'm mad at him." Joke's on him, that wasn't the only talk show meltdown he partook in. A few years after this, Bobcat set a chair on fire on the Jay Leno show for no reason, just for fun. Like he was standing there just going, fire. He was fined over $3,000 and made to replace the chair. Oh, and in case you haven't noticed, he hasn't been asked to be on any talk shows recently. Number 10, Rose McGowan. So let's talk about the show Charmed for a second, a solid series that was on air for basically 10 years. The series followed 3 sisters that discover they are descendants of a long line of good female witches and are destined to fight against the forces of evil. Yes, it was a very fun show. However, just because you play sisters on set does not mean that you're always going to be close in real life. Rose McGowan and Alyssa Milano had a very public altercation that resulted in a little incident on set being shared with the world. Rose claimed that Alyssa threw a fit in front of the crew, yelling, "They don't pay me enough to do this stuff," only she didn't say stuff. She called Alyssa's behavior appalling, claiming she cried every time that the show got renewed for another season because it just meant more time on a toxic set. Alyssa never shared her comments on the situation, confirming what she was being accused of. Number 9, Richard Gere. Richard Gere is one of those actors that doesn't really act. Sometimes people just get hired for films because they have a face for it or the style. For Richard, he did not have enough class and moxie to keep a handle on his role in the film Lords of the Flatbush. He was casted to star line Rocky himself, Sylvester Stallone, and according to Sly, the two didn't get along at all. Their beef was strong and long-lasting throughout the entire production until it finally came to a head one day when Richard was a bit too into one scene and he actually grabbed Sylvester pretty aggressively by the collar. When Sly told him to lay off, he laid in instead. The scene was being filmed on Coney Island, and when the actors took a minute to take a break, they tried to break each other. Sly was eating a hot dog alone in his car, which sounds pretty peaceful, and suddenly Richard stormed in, joined him with half of a chicken dripping in mustard, and despite his warnings about the mustard, seriously, it dripped all over his pants. In true Rocky fashion, he elbowed Richard in the face, threw him out of his car, and the altercation resulted in Richard being fired from the project. Oh no, they had to decide between Richard Gere and Rocky. I wonder how quick that decision was. Number 8, Selma Blair. It's funny that this entry involves Charlie Sheen getting a woman fired when he himself has been fired from so many projects because of, well, several reasons. After being fired from 2.5 Men, Sheen returned to the acting world, headlining his own show called Anger Management. It premiered in 2012 with cast featuring Hellboy alumni Selma Blair playing his colleague and friend with benefits on the show. However, Sheen's terrible behavior continued to haunt him from his 2.5 Men days. Blair was very vocal on her problems with Charlie, especially his messy work ethic. Charlie heard bored and he was having none of that, so he threatened to quit the show if Blair was going to remain a part of the cast. Sheen got his way and Blair was let go after starring in 54 episodes. The show didn't last long though. Who would have guessed that a messy actor being the lead was a bad idea? It got cancelled in 2014. Next up, 7. Shannen Doherty. Unfortunately for Shannen Doherty, she gained quite the reputation in Hollywood for being fired due to issues with her co-stars. She may or may not be making another appearance on this list. Who knows? Guess you'll have to stick around to find out. For the first entry, we're going to look back to the very popular series teen drama 90210, a series following the lives of the Walsh family as they moved from Minneapolis to Beverly Hills. Doherty played the character Brenda Walsh, with her character eventually befriending several students at Beverly Hills High, including Donna Martin, played by Tori Spelling. The series was a hit after its initial season, however, with increased popularity came massive egos. Doherty and Spelling started clashing on set constantly, adding additional drama to the production team that really just didn't need to be there. Considering Tori's father, Aaron Spelling, was the producer on the show, it's pretty simple to piece together what happened. Doherty claimed that she was officially let go for having a haircut that messed up the continuity of the show, but a wig could have fixed that, so better believe Tori Spelling told her papa to boot her from the series. Number 6. Edward Norton. As we all know, Edward Norton didn't last long as the Incredible Hulk in the MCU, only being in one movie in 2008. By the way, I've read some of the comments, and no, Edward Norton was not the first person to play the Hulk on screen. The honor goes to Lou Ferrigno and Bill Bixby from the original series, and don't you dare get me started on Eric Bana, looking like he's farting every time he turns into the Hulk. The 2008 film was a success, but not a massive box office goat. The studio were at odds and they wanted to keep using the Hulk and incorporate him into the Avengers, but Edward Norton was becoming increasingly difficult to work with. When he was contacted to keep playing the character, he demanded more money from the studio. However, he was already on thin ice following his time filming The Incredible Hulk. While not some wild on-set meltdown, Norton did make some pretty odd choices. For instance, as part of his contract, he was allowed to rewrite the script as much as he wanted, but it still needed to be approved. So he wrote new scripts over and over again until we got the 2008 Incredible Hulk movie with some of Ed's ideas baked into the final script. Kevin Feige claims that the choice to part ways with Ed was not based on money, but instead on Marvel just wishing to hire an actor that embodies the creative and collaboration side of their talented members. Essentially, he was like, Mark Ruffalo's nicer than you and he doesn't write his scripts, so bye-bye. This ended up being a great decision on both parts though, because Mark Ruffalo is fantastic as Bruce Banner and the Hulk, and Edward went on to make several high-quality films, including a few collaborations with Wes Anderson. Moonrise Kingdom would not have been the same without Edward Norton as Scoutmaster Ward. Number 5. Anne Hathaway. So a fun fact that I was unaware of until today, Anne Hathaway was almost a secondary lead in one of the most universally loved Seth Rogen movies of all time. Knocked Up from 2007 follows Seth Rogen and Katherine Heigl as they prepare for the arrival of an unplanned baby after a one-night stand. The cast was packed with stellar comedians like Paul Rudd, Jonah Hill, Leslie Mann, so many more, and the cast almost featured an up-and-coming actor at the time, Anne Hathaway. Anne is famous these days for roles in movies like Princess Diary, Interstellar, and Ocean's 8. These days, she's considered to be at the top of the A-list. In 2013, she even took home her first Oscar for Best Supporting Actress. Now, before this though, she actually agreed to be in Knocked Up because she thought the script was great and that Seth Rogen, is Seth Rogen. You work with him every chance you can. However, she eventually decided not to participate in the film after one issue with the script became cause for concern. The scene in question was one of the final moments in the film, which for those of you who have seen the movie know is pretty graphic. The birthing scene in Knocked Up ended up being a combination of Katherine acting and some close-up clips of her cookie. Anne read that part and decided that her first role in a major comedy movie should maybe be something else. Although it was confirmed that it was not going to be her bits and bobs on display, she has a no birthday suit clause. It worked out for everyone though, because Katherine did a great job despite hating the set apparently, and Anne Hathaway is one of the biggest movie stars to date, so good for her. Number 4, Dennis Hopper. Dennis Hopper is one of the groundbreaking actors and directors from the 1960s and 70s New Hollywood, eventually finding his niche in the early 90s, playing villains in movies like Speed, Waterworld, and the live-action Mario Brothers movie, where he plays Bowser. Yes, that exists. No, it's not good. So it came as no surprise when he was casted to play Kristoff, the all-powerful TV producer controlling Truman Burbank's life in the movie The Truman Show. The cast was incredible and included Hollywood heavyweight Jim Carrey as the titular Truman. Anyone with a brain cell would have been excited to be a part of this film, still considered to be one of his best dramatic performances. However, 2 days into filming his scenes for Kristoff, which were only expected to take take about 10 days to film, Hopper was unceremoniously let go from the set. Apparently Dennis had a contract in place with producer Scott Rudin that he would be fired should his work be unsatisfactory. He must have been pretty bad in the role, as the director Peter Weir has been described as extremely reluctant to ever remove an actor from a movie. Reports later surfaced that Hopper was basically half asleep while playing the character, and while Kristoff wasn't written to be like a manic man or anything, he did require some effort to be properly pulled off. Ultimately, Ed Harris stepped in to play the role after production had been desperately trying to replace Dennis to avoid having the film be shut down entirely. Thankfully that never happened, and The Truman Show has gone on to be one of the most depressingly heartfelt Jim Carrey performances ever. Oh, and Ed actually got nominated for an Oscar, so sorry Dennis, looks like it was a good move. Number 3, Jean-Claude Van Damme. The Belgian actor Jean-Claude Van Damme was just on the verge of coming into his own career as the Muscles from Brussels when he landed a job opposite of Arnold Schwarzenegger in 1987's action flick Predator. This sounded like the perfect casting choice. Jean would have worked alongside the likes of Carl Weathers and Jesse Ventura. While this may have turned out cool, the reality was that Jean wasn't casted to play one of the Marines at all. Instead, he was casted to play the titular Predator himself. The special effects artists behind the project called the experience with Jean as a hilarious comedy of errors, in which no party knew exactly what the other was expecting. Apparently nobody actually told him that the role was basically just a glorified stuntman. They were prepared to direct him to just hop around like a frog, but Jean was obviously confused and upset with that choice. According to him, he had just gotten off the boat and was under the impression that he was going to be showcasing his martial arts skills to the world, but instead he was reduced to a massive, slow-moving alien with dreadlocks. To the surprise of absolutely nobody, Van Damme was furious and dispirited about spending the entire movie cooped up in a clunky and often ridiculous-looking suit, and he was ultimately fired and replaced with Kevin Peter Hall. The idea that he was just on set being like, I can barely move in this thing, it makes me so happy. Number 2, Janet Hubert. Will Smith got his big break in the acting world thanks to the success of the sitcom Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. It's a show following Will as the titular prince, living with a wealthy family in Bel-Air surrounded by cousins, uncles, and of course Aunt Vivian. In season 1, Aunt Viv was played by a woman named Janet Hubert Witten, but as a lot of people know, she was recasted after an on-set feud with Will Smith went a little bit too far. According to Will, Janet viewed him as an antagonist in her life. She had been in the business for years, and suddenly Will Smith popped into her life, and she had a tinge of jealousy towards him because he got into town, got a gig. Well, hey, that's what happens when you're good. She was trying to convince the producers to give her character more screen time and allow her to breathe on camera, but they said no because it wasn't the Aunt Viv show. She fought back hard, but it was ultimately decided that she would be asked to sit out the rest of the series and was replaced by Daphne Maxwell Reid, who is Aunt Viv. Number 1, Thomas Gibson. Thomas made a name for himself, starring as one of the leads of the series Criminal Minds. He was on the show for a few years, and in that time he made quite a few problems for those unfortunate enough to be staff members of the series. There were a few issues over the years that would have warranted some action, like screaming at producers and writers for not doing a good job, but the incident that got him kicked off of the show for good involved, well, a kick. In 2016, Thomas was swiftly fired from the series after an incident with a writer named Virgil Williams. An internal investigation revealed that Thomas kicked Virgil one day during production of an episode that Gibson was actually directing. And as I said, this isn't the first incident on set that really should have resulted in some kind of punishment, because 3 years earlier, in 2013, he pleaded no contest to no juice related reckless driving after being arrested under suspicion of DUI, and 3 years before that, he allegedly shoved an assistant director, Ian Wolfe, during a late night location scene. That led to the studio ordering Gibson to take 8 hours of anger management. According to most people on the set, Thomas was a wild card. Some days he was friendly and accommodating, and the next he went ballistic. Number 10, Joaquin Phoenix. We understand a dedication to one's craft, and Joaquin Phoenix is a prime example. Joaquin's acting career has been going steady since he first appeared in the 1989 comedy Parenthood when he was in his mid-teens. While he's seen as one of the greatest actors in recent history, his reputation on set was tarnished thanks to a little freakout while filming the 2018 solo flick Joker. He appeared on Jimmy Kimmel Live to promote the shoot when Jimmy played a behind-the-scenes clip of Joaquin getting loud and angry at a man named Larry and the constant whispering behind the cameras before dropping a few F-bombs and storming off the set. When the cameras came back to the studio, Joaquin was frozen in shock, clearly not expecting that clip to have ever seen the light of day. He explained that Larry was a cinematographer who had been teasing Joaquin off set earlier in the day, calling him a diva and referring to him as Cher. In fact, during his on-set outburst, you can hear him say, "But you gonna call me Cher, huh? How is that an insult? She's the best." He then explained that there's a lot of pressure on set, especially in a closed space like the apartment from the scene that they were filming. He apologized to the audience for having to see him behave in such a manner and watching him freak out on set, which was met with applause. At the end of the day, he's a performer, no harm ever came from the outburst. Hey man, if Larry's okay with it, so are we. Number 9, Nick Cage. One of the most unhinged men in Hollywood history. One of the few people who somehow managed to star in a billion movies but has barely seen or kept a cent of it. During a press junket in 1990, Nick went on a talk show called Wogan to discuss his latest project, Wild at Heart. When the host Terry Wogan announced Cage, he entered with karate kicks, a front flip somersault. He threw wads of cash at the audience because hey, he was Nicolas frickin' Cage, man! He finally sat down, and moments before the interview truly began, Nick asked if he could just take off his jacket for a second. He proceeded to take off his jacket and the shirt that was underneath it. If people thought that Nick was all together before, they were proven very wrong during this interview. Despite the content being relatively tame, the entire time you can see the sweat glistening off Nick's hairy chest. Cause hey, guess what? Wearing a leather jacket on your bare chest is beyond uncomfortable. Sure, it might look cool until you take it off and you're covered in a heat rash. Nick's always been unhinged, but his odd behavior in the 90s was apparent and well documented, thanks to him literally being in a minimal of 2 movies a year. Number 8, Christian Bale. Christian is a versatile actor, both physically and skill-wise. He's able to shrink and grow his physique seemingly at will. He's played everything from a skinny substance addict to Batman. In 2008, Christian starred in the 3rd film of the Terminator franchise, Terminator Salvation. While he was filming a scene, director of photography Shane Holbert apparently moved into Christian's eyesight. This caused Christian to snap out of character and into defense mode. The clip is now infamous of Christian screaming at Shane, but to make matters worse, anyone trying to calm Christian down on the set were met with an equally swift verbal lashing. While the cinematographer was just checking a light to make sure if it was in the right place, aka doing his job, Bale made it his mission to share his intense feelings with the entire crew. When the audio leaked, Bale apologized for his actions and told the world to praise the crew for their work. While the movie turned out okay, visually speaking, the project as a whole is remembered as one of the worst entries in the Terminator franchise to date. Number 7, Tom Cruise. Now, it's one thing to be asking people to join your church all the time. Whatever, not a big deal. But Tom's behavior as a member of society has been rough to say the least. Following the announcement that he was engaged to Katie Holmes in the early 2000s, Tom appeared on an episode of The Oprah Winfrey Show that has gone down in history as one of the most chaotic TV interviews of all time. From the moment he walks on stage, he has such a strange energy. He's oddly excited, like he just got told the best news in his entire life. He throws his arms up in the air, he rubs Oprah's shoulders like she's a lamp and he's trying to summon the genie. He revealed to the audience that the excitement was from his engagement to fellow actor Katie Holmes. Awesome, man, but hey, can you please just stop trying to break Oprah? Seriously, Tom jumped on her couch, he grabbed her hands over and over. She couldn't even get the questions that she had for him out because he was just so chaotic. Eventually, Oprah was like, whatever, just bring Katie out. And the cameras followed Tom through the studio as he ran around trying to find her. It looked like a scene from Paranormal Activity. It was horrifying. Tom's energy continued to stay at that level of chaos throughout his entire marriage to Katie, but since they're divorced, he's just nuts. He is just nuts now. Number 6, Will Smith. Wait a minute, when did Will Smith have a meltdown? Just kidding, you guys know this one by now. In 2022, Chris Rock was hosting the 94th annual Oscar ceremony when he decided to make a little joke about Jada Pinkett Smith and her hair loss. Good old G.I. Jane joke. Rock expressed his excitement to see Jada in a fictional G.I. Jane movie, and immediately following the joke, Rock stood in confusion as Will Smith made his way to the stage. Will walked up, he adjusted his jacket, he looked strong, confident, he took a firm stance, and then he just smacked Chris right across the face just as hard as he could. He winded up his hand to conjure up the full power that he had inside of him. Initially, this was seen as a planned joke between the two, but then Will started shouting at Rock several times during the ceremony to keep his wife's name out of his mouth. Chris handled the situation well though. He kept his cool, he laughed it off for the cameras, and he brought out the next award presenter, literally the classiest man of the night. He was professional and quick to get the night back on track, but unfortunately an hour later, Will Smith won the Oscar for Best Actor in a leading role in King Richard. He played Richard Williams, the father of tennis superstars Venus and Serena Williams, and during his speech, he gave a half-hearted apology for his actions before claiming that the situation was due to his months of portraying the father on set, leaving him with an extreme paternal sense to protect protect his family. Unfortunately for Will, the slap was enough to get him banned from the Oscars indefinitely, and not just that, but he's been banned from Hollywood entirely, as he is now being seen as an aggressive man with no impulse control. He was fired from any upcoming projects and currently sits at home all day polishing his one and only Oscar while a single tear rolls down his face. Poor old Will Smith. Number 5. Joan Rivers. While speaking with CNN host Frederica Whitfield about her role as a fashion critique on the reality series Fashion Police, Joan did not appreciate the questions that she was being asked. While calm at first, the host claimed that Joan's comments on the show may be considered mean or cold-hearted, but the fans wanted to hear what she had to say. But before being able to even finish that sentence, Joan decided to clap back with, "It's not mean, excuse me," claiming that she says the truth. She's just saying whatever the people on the couch at home are probably thinking. She calls people and their styles ugly on TV. She may be cold, but her words are meant to heal and not to berate. Okay, so everyone who called me ugly in high school was just trying to encourage me? I don't think so. The interviewer then went on to ask Joan how she felt her words were coming across to the audience of both her show and the readers of her book, which apparently featured some pretty dark content about people that Joan just had no business discussing. Joan said, "If you can make something funny in life, do it. Hey, I've got pages and pages of jokes about the events in New York in 2001, but I'm not allowed to say them because they'd make people uncomfortable." Not a good defense, Joni. The final straw came when Joan was asked about the fur coat that she was wearing on the cover of her book and the backlash that she may face from animal rights activists. Well, Joan became furious and decided to leave the interview, but not before calling out Frederica for asking negative questions, for wearing leather shoes, and she reminded her that she made people laugh for over 50 years, okay? Quit asking me why I did this and why are you wearing that. I'm done. She walked off set and was never invited to return again. Number 4. Bobcat Goldthwait. Allow me to start this entry with an impression of Bobcat Goldthwait smelling something that he enjoys. Thank you. Bobcat may not be much of an actor these days, but in the 80s and 90s, this man was dominating the film and comedy scene. His zany brand of over-the-top high-energy performance was well received by any and all who saw him. Heck, I can still hear his voice echoing in my head whenever I think about Police Academy. In 1994, comedian Arsenio Hall invited his longtime friend Bobcat onto his talk show, which unfortunately was in its final days on air. When he heard of the cancellation, Bobcat decided to send a message to the big brains that made that dumb decision. He spray painted the words Paramount on the wall behind him, he threw furniture around, he breaks TV screens, all while Arsenio just sits back and laughs. When they returned from commercial break, the set was in ruins. Despite that though, Arsenio joked, saying, "The worst part of all this is that I gotta pretend like I'm mad at him." Joke's on him, that wasn't the only talk show meltdown that he's partaken in. A few years after this, Bobcat set a chair on fire on the Jay Leno show, for no reason other than just for fun, I guess. Like he was standing there going, "Fire! Yay!" He was fined over $3,000 and made to replace the chair. In case you haven't noticed, he hasn't been asked to appear on any talk shows in recent history. So I wonder why. Number 3. Bill Murray. He came, he saw, he kicked his ass! Bill Murray, the star of box office beauties like Ghostbusters, Groundhog's Day, and Garfield, nope, Garfield, can't say it, I can't say it, nope, can't talk about it. Bill was doing a round of press in 2015 when he made an appearance on 2 talk shows equally as smashed. He stopped by MSNBC studios to appear on the show The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell. As the show was about to cut to break, Bill tries to sit and he falls on his tall studio chair. In the photo, you can see just how done O'Donnell is with Bill. According to Murray, after he finally got on his feet, he informed the audience that he had just finished doing the David Letterman show. He then went to dinner and had a few glasses of the no juice before stopping by the studio. As you may expect, Bill slurs his way through the entire interview, constantly going off topic to give the classic, "I love you guys, man, you're doing such a good job." Bill actually physically had a meltdown. He started sliding down in his seat to the point where he was almost doing the interview from the floor. I'm not telling anyone to drink no juice by any means, but I think we can all agree that inebriated Bill Murray is quite the hoot. Number 2. Anna Nicole Smith. Anna wasn't just your average Playboy bunny turned Hollywood sweetheart. No. She was also a spokesperson for a line of dietary products after losing a significant amount of weight herself. At the 2004 American Music Awards, Anna took to the stage to introduce rap star Kanye West, but stumbled and fumbled her way through the entire thing, sparking widespread concern about her health. Her speech has lived on in infamy. She mumbles, fumbles, and tries to sell herself to the audience over and over again. Her former partner, Larry Burkhart, revealed the sad truth of the situation 10 years after after her passing. He said that Anna had been taking medication at the time to help recover from her enhancement surgeries. She had chronic pain in every part of her body and unfortunately did not follow the recommended dosage her doctor prescribed. The night before the show, Anna had apparently suffered a small seizure and took copious amounts of medication to help ease the pain and keep her awake for the award show. The result was Anna appearing to be under the influence of something and Kanye West being brought out to one of the strangest introductions in awards show history. And at number 1, oh look, it's Tom Cruise again. I know, right? Shocker. We know Tom Cruise is insane. There's no denying that. He may be one of Hollywood's biggest and brightest in his early days, but his career and skills as an actor have slowly been going downhill ever since he divorced Katie Holmes. Now, to prove his insanity and rage, let's just talk about an incident that occurred on his latest Mission Impossible movie set. An audio clip was released of Cruise berating several crew members with intense anger. The crew in question were accused of not following the safety protocols that were in place at the time. In his rant, Tom is heard swearing and screaming about the rules and how if he wants something to happen, it's gonna happen. The crew are essentially his minions who must do the master's bidding. The rant went viral, but Cruise actually defended his rant rather than apologizing for it, claiming that he said what he said and the stakes were at an all-time high, so suck it up. While this may have happened at a time when Hollywood was shut down and many productions were on hold, it's no excuse to harass the people trying to make you look good.